Kia ora koutou te whānau. Ki mai kia hau, he aha te mea nui o te ao. Mā koe ki atu, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata. If you ask me what is the most important thing in this world, I will reply, people, people, people. This whakatauki is about recognising that other people must be central to our actions as human beings, a concept which sums up my mother and her life journey. Prue was born in Wellington on the 19th of May 1926. She was christened Prudence Joan and was known in her family as Joan to distinguish her from her mother Prue, our nana. Mum's father Jim worked as an accountant for a Wellington importing firm, George and Doughty. Nana Prue had trained as a milliner, a hat maker, and she and her sister Millie had a millinery or hat shop on Ridderford Street in Newtown, near the John Street intersection, just across from the hospital. For the first few years of Mum's life, they shared a house in Hanson Street with Millie and her husband, Harold Bigwood. This lasted until one December when Mum was 4. Things became a little tense between the sisters when Nana asked if Millie could mind the shop the next day so that she could take Mum into the city to see Father Christmas. And Millie told her that she'd taken Joan the day before. Jim told Prue that Joan was going to grow up not knowing who her mother was, and that it was time they moved out of Millie and Harold's house. The millinery shop was closed, and Jim and Prue bought their own house at 159 Washington Avenue in Brooklyn. The following year, the young Joan began school at Brooklyn Primary. Mum wrote about this time in her life. One day, I was asked to bring an exercise book to school, and Mother managed to find one in the house that had a used first page. She very carefully removed the front and back pages, and I took it to the teacher next day. I very clearly remember standing by the teacher's desk while she slowly and silently inspected it, and I heaved a big sigh of relief when it passed muster. Mum's experience of growing up during the Depression without much money to go around made her understanding of and compassionate towards those who were in need throughout her entire life. At the end of 1933, when Mum was 7, Jim and Prue bought the Empire Drapery in Island Bay, where they lived above the shop over the road from the Empire Cinema. When she was older, Mum became the delivery girl for the shop, taking parcels all around Island Bay on her bicycle. The family were regular attendees at the Methodist Church in Mersey Street. During the polio epidemic in the summer of 1936-1937, an event that I think we can now sympathise with a lot more than we probably would have a few months ago, Mum was sent to the Rye Valley to stay with her cousin Marion Gurley and her husband Hugh Scott, who were farming there. Mum loved this time, as there were plenty of neighbours' children to play with and lots to do on the farm. Marion's daughter Elaine is participating in the service today, online from Canada. Mum's cousins on her mother's side were also very important to her, Noel Sutherland and Pat Struan and Ken Munro. Mum remembered going to stay at Rugged Ridges with Aunt Olive and Uncle Grant, and where her cousin Pat taught her to ride a horse. Joan was encouraged to learn piano, although her heart yearned more for dancing, which Nana disapproved of, since ballet seemed to involve not wearing enough clothes, in her opinion. Joan also had speech lessons. She didn't enjoy piano with her first teacher, but when she began learning from Ina Connor in Pyrie Street, she began to discover joy in her music. She told me that Ina would begin every lesson by asking about school and home before they began any music. I think Mum learned from this wonderful teacher the importance of relationships and nurturing a student's self-confidence. Eventually, Mum went on to gain her ATCL in both pianoforte and speech. She attended Island Bay Primary and later Wellington East Girls College. Her closest friend at primary and secondary school was Ellen Berthold, later Ellen Ramsden, who lived close by and remained a lifelong friend. Another Wellington East friend was Margaret Selkeld, later Margaret Bickford. It was at Wellington East that Mum became Prue rather than Joan, because, by request of the school, as there were 3 or 4 Joans in her class. After this, Mum was joined to her family and Prue to the rest of the world. At Wellington East, Prue, as we can now call her, studied 2 Shakespeare plays every year, which she loved, but she was always very proud of the fact that she had discovered the delights of Shakespeare for herself before she ever made it to high school, reading a copy of As You Like It, which she found in her father's little bookcase. When she left school, Mum went to Teachers College, mainly because that was what everyone else seemed to be doing. The alternatives were nursing, the army, or secretarial work. She proved to be a natural teacher, incredibly patient, and with the knack of helping her students feel good about themselves. At Teachers College, the students were encouraged to enrol part-time at university. This was a novel idea. Neither of Mum's parents had even been to high school. She enrolled for 1 paper and was extremely surprised to pass it. Then she realised that if she kept doing that, she could get a whole degree. In 1945, Mum was in the Teachers College drama team, which went to winter tourney in August in Auckland. On the train on the way there, the news came through that Japan had surrendered and the war in the Pacific was over. Apparently there was, quote, little sleep on the train that night and much beer was consumed, unquote. It was that same year that Mum's cousin Struan, who did the first reading, came to live with his Auntie Prue and Uncle Jim in Island Bay so that he could go to school in Wellington. Struan became very much Mum's little brother, and the bond between them has always remained very strong. At the end of her teacher training, Mum did 1 full-time year at university to finish her BA. And this was when she became aware of an extremely handsome returned serviceman in her Stage 1 French lecture. This was the dashing Martin Wilson, back from the Air Force's Coastal Command and studying to teach English at secondary school. Mum would carelessly leave her books on the bench behind her where he sat so that she could flirt with him when she moved them out of his way. The relationship was not all plain sailing, however, as his mother felt that Prue was beneath him since her parents were in trade. Pressure was put on Martin to forget about girls and concentrate on his studies. However, love won out in the end. Prue and Martin married on July the 3rd, 1948, and rented rooms in a house in Island Bay, not too far from the drapery. Mum began teaching full-time at Berhampore School in 1949, while Dad was still at Teachers College. Excuse me, I'm just going to pause. I have to go mute somebody, apparently. But not me. This one's not meant to be muted, is it? Okay. Sorry, people. Just slight technical problem here. I'm sorry, I cannot find Tanya, but she needs to mute her microphone, please. Thank you. Okay. Prue and Joan married in July 1948 and rented rooms in a house in Island Bay, not far from the drapery. Mum was teaching full-time at Berhampore School and Dad was still at Teachers College. In 1950, using a return services rehab loan of £1,000, they bought a new 2-bedroom house in Wainuiomata. Dad got a teaching job at Hutt Valley High School and Mum at Wainuiomata School. In 1952, my brother Doug was born, followed by Gordon in 1955. After Dad completed his MA, Mum encouraged him to get singing lessons. He learned from Stanley Oliver and Donald Munro and was soon winning competitions and singing solo roles for the newly formed New Zealand Opera Company. Prue and Martin were also involved in the local Wainui dramatic and choral societies, a pattern that would continue throughout their lives. In 1957, the family moved to Waimate in the South Island, which was a promotion for Dad to head of English. Dad made a number of solo broadcasts of Schubert Lieder for Radio New Zealand and encouraged Mum to audition for Radio New Zealand. After that, she accompanied all his broadcasts on piano. She found live broadcasts a little stressful, but did a brilliant job. During this period, Granddad Jim was hit by a car in Wellington and died from his injuries. Nana discovered that the drapery business was not doing well and that Jim had remortgaged their Brooklyn house which had been rented out while they lived above the drapery, to her own sister, Dot. Nana was devastated. She built the business back up and sold it and the house to repay the mortgage, then came to Waimate to live with Mum and Dad. Nana lived with our family from that time onwards. In 1959, Prue and Martin, Nana and the two boys moved to Murupara, where Dad was head of English at Rangatahi College. Coming from Otaki, Dad enjoyed the bicultural nature of the school, and he and Prue enthusiastically... now you can't hear me? Yep, the Zoom can hear me. How's that? Oh, okay. Yeah, he and Prue enthusiastically instituted a bicultural speech and drama festival. This was when Mum started teaching senior English at the college and loved it. I was born in 1961, a most important event. In 1962, the family relocated to Te Aroha, where Dad was again head of English. My sister Janet was born in 1965. Mum had achieved her goal of 2 boys and 2 girls, and in that order, which was the family that she had told Dad she wanted when they got married. It was in 1966, the year Prue was to turn 40, that she and Dad embarked on the big adventure of teaching overseas. Dad was appointed head of English at Tanjong Loban College in Miri, Sarawak, on the coast of Borneo. For Prue, it was a big undertaking, moving to Sarawak with 4 children, ranging from Doug, aged 14, to Janet, who was only 9 months old, and her 83-year-old mother in tow. But she thrived in this environment. I remember one time she took me walking with Janet in the pushchair to the dairy, and we were accosted by a very aggressive goose. Mum grabbed it firmly by the neck, spun it around and hurled it. No bird was threatening her children. I would add that no goose was permanently harmed in this incident. I turned 5 in July that first year in Miri, and as the local English-run school did not take pupils at that age, Mum promptly started up a new entrant class in our house with a number of children of expats who were of a similar age and taught us all to read. She was also taking private piano pupils at this time. When I started school, Mum got a job teaching at a local primary school in Miri. After 2 years in Malaysia, Mum and Dad headed to Te Reo College in the Cook Islands in 1968. Doug and Gordon went to boarding school in Oamaru, but Jan and I and Nana got to experience island life. I have wonderful memories of our time in Raro. I remember Mum writing and directing a play for us and the neighbouring kids to perform. It involved a dragon and a princess and included musical items accompanied by Mum on piano, one of which was "My eyes are dim, I cannot see, I have not brought my specs with me." I'm not quite sure how that related to the Dragon Quest. Dad and Mum were very involved in music at the college, and I vividly remember the Te Reo College choir rehearsing the Hallelujah chorus in our living room, with Dad conducting and Mum playing the piano. From Rarotonga, the family moved back to New Zealand in 1970. Dad took a job as head of English at Hawera High School, where Mum taught English and also junior French. Mum and Dad directed Sheila Wynne Shakespeare scenes and a production of HMS Pinafore, with more rehearsals in our living room, featuring Mum on piano and also teaching students how to dance the hornpipe. She was very involved in the Repertory Society in Hawera and did props for a number of productions. Somehow, while doing all of this, Mum also ferried me to swimming club, gymnastics, brownies and ballet, and to swimming carnivals all over Taranaki. Dad's health was problematic at this time, and he decided to take early retirement. He encouraged Mum to apply for the head of English job at Kerikeri High School, where Brian Smart, who she knew from Rarotonga, was the principal. By this time, both Doug and Gordon had left home, so in 1975, Mum, Dad, Nana and we 2 girls moved to the far north, with Mum as the breadwinner and Dad as the house husband. We initially lived in a schoolhouse in town, and later Mum and Dad built a 3-bedroom house in Mawson Avenue at Waipapa. Nana's health deteriorated, and Mum had to put her into care in Kawakawa, and Nana died later that year, aged 92. Mum loved being head of department, though she quickly discovered that others that she was working with had a lot more English in their degrees than she did, as her degree had been in education. With Dad's encouragement, she enrolled in distance learning through Massey University to rectify this, revelling in the Stage 2 and 3 English papers. Prue and Martin were involved in the local arts society and sang in the Waimate North Consort, a chamber choir directed by Jane Barnett. Prue assisted with directing many drama productions at school. I also remember her heading off on her own during the holidays to attend the Early Music Festival in the Hawke's Bay or Massey courses at Palmerston North, while Dad stayed home to mind us girls, a real role reversal. In 1978, my brother Gordon married Robin Adam, the last time that we had all of us together for a major family occasion. That was my final year at school. So by 1979, it was just Prue, Martin and Janet at home. Dad died in 1980 after surgery to remove a bowel tumour. He was only 56 and Mum was only 54. Dad's death was a big shock to us all, and it took Mum a while to cope and regroup. Janet was in the 5th form that year, so the impact on her was huge. She grew up fast and ended up going to university at Massey in 1982, straight after 6th form. That same year, Mum's first grandchild was born, Gordon's eldest son, Vaughan, who's here in the chapel, as are 4 of the grandsons. Prue stayed teaching at Kerikeri for another 3 years after Janet left home. She saw her crowning achievement at Kerikeri High as the production of A Midsummer Night's Dream, which she directed in the big packing shed, which was the Memorial Hall. During that time, Mum finished her English Lit studies at Massey and began to do linguistic papers towards a diploma in teaching English as a second language. She started running to build up her fitness. In 1984, Gordon's second son, Brent, was born. And around this time, Prue dusted off her CV and applied for a job with volunteer service abroad. In 1985, VSA posted her to a position as lecturer in English at the Tonga Teachers Training College in Nuku'alofa. Prue was then 59 years old, much the same age I am now. She had 3 years in Tonga, and at one stage, the Teachers College, the local high school, and the Atanese Institute were coordinating their timetables so that she could teach English at all 3 institutions. She was also finishing her TESOL from Massey by correspondence. Prue came home to New Zealand for Janet and David's wedding in January 1986. In January 1987, I visited Mum in Tonga and watched her complete a 10-kilometre run with the Harriers Club in the broad daylight in the Tongan heat. Her only complaints about living in Tonga involved a rat that she couldn't find or get rid of until someone had fixed the wire netting over her window, and the fact that she'd found a large cockroach, quote, humping her toothbrush. Major disinfecting followed, and she found a container to keep her toothbrush in after that. At one point while she was in Tonga, Prue's gas was cut off. When initial approaches to the local Department of Education proved unsuccessful, she packed a thermos of tea and a bag of marking and established herself in a chair outside the boss's office. She politely but firmly refused to leave until someone paid her gas bill and reconnected it.
So it's fine on there, I believe. One line having issues.
Sorry, people, technical hitch.
You're doing great.
It's a brand new lecture straight over packet, so if things don't work, I don't know what little.
Okay, somebody said that it needed to be pointing a little bit more towards me too.
Okay, I'll do it. So,
No, maybe not closer, but just more direct.
yeah.
Right, so the little white-haired Palangi woman sitting in the corridor and refusing to leave achieved her goal, needless to say. Her gas bill was paid and it was reconnected. Is that all right? It's very echoey.
So it's not pointing so much at the speaker. So much with the speaker.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Yeah, so that was the Prue method of persuasion. and very successful, of course. That last year Prue was in Tonga, 2 more grandchildren were born, Philip and Gordon's youngest son Philip and Doug and Ann's son Alex. In 1988, Prue returned to New Zealand and moved to Wellington, beginning the part of her life that probably a lot of her listeners and Wellington friends are more familiar with. She bought a 2-bedroom flat in an apartment block in Marchbank Street in Mount Victoria. She was back in her hometown, aged 62, and was volunteering to teach English to recent immigrants through the Home Language Tutors Project. She taught ESOL at Wellington Polytech Summer School and Wellington Community Institute. That year, I enrolled part-time at Vic to do my diploma in Māoritanga, and Mum enrolled in the introductory Māori language papers with me. As well as the Māori language papers and her ESOL teaching, she took a middle English paper. Mum and I were also both having singing lessons at that time from Rosie Salas, who has recorded a song for this service. In 1989, Prue did English Honours postgraduate studies in a full-time year at Vic, graduating with an upper second degree. She was continuing her ESOL teaching and also fostered a couple of teenagers through the Open Home Foundation. I also recall her doing a ropes course and an ice experience course at the Outdoor Pursuit Centre and participating in a women's only traverse of the North Island from coast to coast around this time. It was as if Prue had a bucket list and was intent on sucking the marrow out of life, and good on her. 1990 was a very difficult year as we lost my brother Doug, aged 38, to leukaemia. This was very hard for Mum, and like Dad's loss, it took her a while to bounce back. Speaking of bouncing, one weekend around this time, Mum and I drove up to New Plymouth to stay with Gordon, who by that time had separated from Robin and was living at Arawa Street. The boys were there for the weekend and they had a pogo stick. I don't know if you guys remember this. I looked at it enviously and decided that I was probably a bit too old for that. I was 29. 64-year-old Mum had no such qualms. The moment she saw it, she exclaimed, "Oh, that looks like fun, can I have a go?" And next minute, Mum was on the ground with a broken ankle, looking very surprised that things hadn't worked out according to her plan. I remember the day, not long after that Mum showed me an advertisement for a job through AIT at Lampang College of Commerce and Technology in Thailand. She asked me a little tentatively, what did I think? Was it a crazy idea? I said, go for it. And in 1993, aged 67, Prue was off to Lampang, where she lectured in English and advised on course design. She thoroughly enjoyed the work and was amused by the fact that at this school it was the staff who wore the uniform and not the students. On one holiday, Mum's idea of a good time was to go on an elephant trek up towards the Cambodian border to see the poppy fields. Like, this is the opium industry you're talking about here. She wrote to Janet that it was a great trip and her elephant only stampeded once. After 3 years in Thailand, Prue took a 2-year contract in Medan, Indonesia, at the Logo Education Centre. Arrangements here were a little dodgy. At one point, Prue was put on a plane to Singapore for a day and back so that she could renew her visa. When she returned to Indonesia, she was detained at the airport and had to wait until someone from Logo came and bribed officials to let her into the country. In her second year in Medan, Mum's time in Indonesia came to an abrupt end when she broke her femur spectacularly. She had to be flown back to Wellington for surgery, a very expensive trip. As it turned out, she didn't have any travel insurance. Apparently that had been too expensive. Prue was still on crutches in May 1996 when we organised a big party for her 70th birthday at Crossways. It was at this time that Mum had to give up running, as the fracture had revealed that she had really bad osteoporosis, so it was at high risk of further fractures if she had a fall. Having decided that she probably shouldn't go teaching overseas again now, Prue renewed her teacher registration in New Zealand and began teaching ESOL at Wellington East for a group of refugee students, supervising correspondence school work for students at the New Zealand School of Dance and providing language support for some of their Japanese dance students, among whom I particularly remember Takashi. In 1999, aged 73, Mum decided she needed, wait for it, more education. So she completed a Masters in Linguistics at Vic, a Masters in Linguistics with merit, I should say, all the while maintaining her teaching at the School of Dance. After graduating again in 2000, Prue came backpacking in Europe with Sean and me for 3 months. We went to Italy, Germany, France and the UK together. On a beachfront in Sicily, an elderly Italian gentleman approached me and asked how old Mum was. I told him 74. He gazed at her admiringly, throwing up his hands and saying, 74! Complimenti, signora, complimenti! He was clearly, hadn't seen very many septuagenarian backpackers and he was very impressed. Yeah. Probably the highlight of the trip from Prue's point of view was when we saw Hamlet at Shakespeare's Globe in London. She and I in paid seats and Sean standing in the groundlings pit for the entire performance. Back in New Zealand, Prue still hadn't quite got the hang of retirement. And she was assisting with reading recovery and ESOL at the Clyde Key School. Over Christmas 2000-2001, she had a full-time job as an assistant teacher at the English Language Institute Summer School at Victoria University. She had her own office at the university and a nameplate on the door, and saw this as a highlight of her teaching career. In 2001, Prue's eldest grandson, Vaughan, came to live with her in her Mount Vic flat while he was studying for his degree at Massey, Wellington. That year also saw the birth of Janet and David's eldest son, Joshua. Prue continued to work as a relieving teacher for the Capital Language Academy and was still acting as a volunteer tutor for the Wellington ESOL Home Tutor Service. In 2003, Janet's second son, Hamish, was born, bringing Mum's total of grandsons to 6, granddaughters 0. By the beginning of 2004, Vaughan was in his last year at Massey Wellington and my brother Gordon was beginning a law degree at Vic on a retraining arrangement after having been made redundant by Methanex when they moved to Australia. He stayed in Wellington during the week and headed home to his partner Philippa in New Plymouth most weekends. When Vaughan graduated and moved out of Prue's spare room, his dad Gordon moved in and lived with Mum until he finished his law degree. It was while Gordon was living with Prue that she declared her intention of doing the Trans-Mongolian and Trans-Siberian railways. As nearly as we can recall, this was in 2006, the year that she turned 80, the occasion of another grand birthday bash at Crossways. We persuaded her to join a tour group to provide a bit of extra security and made sure she had good travel insurance this time. Mum flew off to Hong Kong, travelled through China, stayed overnight in a yurt, saw Cossacks racing their horses beside the train, and safely made it to Moscow, St. Petersburg, and triumphantly home to New Zealand, having had a wonderful trip. In these years, Prue finally stopped doing relieving teaching, but she was still going to Scottish country dancing and the Shakespeare Society, activities I find I have forgotten to mention, along with Jennifer Shannon's dance group. Prue went to ballet, the opera, concerts and movies. She and I went to choral-fed May workshops together. I've also failed to mention her earlier years of participation in the Wellington Gilbert and Sullivan Society, kicking up her heels in the chorus line and playing Buttercup in HMS Pinafore. Although I've not said much about Prue's faith journey and her church activities, these were central to her life. From her childhood, in every place she has lived, she has always found a church home and been a regular member of the congregation. When she moved back to Wellington and bought her flat in Mount Vic, she became part of the Crossways Presbyterian Church, of which Jim Cunningham here was the minister at the time, and that Crossways later amalgamated with St Andrews. She was delighted to be made an elder at St Andrews. By the time Gordon finished his law degree at the start of 2009, Prue had begun having transient ischemic attacks which affected her memory. When he went back to New Plymouth, Mum made the decision herself to move into the Rangus retirement village, and she bought her service apartment there in August 2009. After an initial adjustment period, she threw herself into the fitness classes and village activities. She even acquired a boyfriend around this time, Doug Elliott, whom she had met at St Andrews. This relationship gave her a lot of pleasurable companionship, and it was a shame that she and Doug did not have more time together before his health deteriorated and he passed away. Prue was very happy at Rita Angus and received very loving care from all the staff. We always felt secure in the knowledge that she was safe and well cared for when we couldn't be there. We were really pleased that so many family and friends were able to attend Prue's 90th birthday party at Rita Angus in 2016, a most wonderful celebration and acknowledgement of her. I was grateful that Mum was able to be part of my wedding in 2017, and I know Alex and Laura were delighted that Prue was able to be there for theirs in January 2019. It was not until October last year that Prue had to relinquish her service department and move upstairs to the rest home part of Rita Angus. There, she has continued to have superb and loving care. It's very difficult to sum up such an action-packed 94 years. I've gone two times over the limit of time that was given to me, and this speech is actually half the length that it started out. And I still feel like I've left an awful lot out, and I'm sure that there are people listening who have wonderful stories of Prue to share, and if they're not participating in the service to tell us them, they could go and put them on the tributes page, please. Prue's been an adventurer, continually stretching her own boundaries and looking for challenges. Hers has been a life of love, compassion, and service to others. For her, the most important thing has always been people, people, people. I'm very grateful to have had such a mother. Moi mai te whaia, kei roto I te aroha o tō matua i ki a iu krati.